There is a quiet moment most men never talk about, the one that happens late at night when the world goes still, and the mind begins to whisper uncomfortable truths about desire, performance, aging, and the fear of losing something that once felt effortless. And if you've ever found yourself wondering whether your body, your energy, or your connection is slowly slipping away without you fully understanding why, then what you're about to hear might change the way you see intimacy forever. Because the truth is not what most men have been told, and it's far more empowering than you think. Because real performance is not built in a moment of passion, but shaped in the private rituals you repeat when no one is watching. And one of the most overlooked of these is what you do with your body before you sleep. Not just in terms of rest, but in how you reconnect with yourself physically and mentally, in a way that strengthens both confidence and control. And this is where the idea of a nighttime oil routine begins to shift from something that sounds simple or even trivial into something deeply psychological, almost meditative. Because what you are really doing is training your body to slow down, to feel again, to become aware again in a world that has numbed so many men into rushing through intimacy without presence, without sensitivity, without that grounded awareness that actually creates lasting attraction and satisfaction. And the reason this matters more as a man gets older is because the game changes whether we admit it or not. The raw intensity of youth is replaced by something more subtle, something more powerful when understood correctly, but also something that can feel confusing if you are still trying to play by old rules. Because performance is no longer about proving anything. It becomes about connection, control, rhythm, and emotional presence. And yet most men were never taught how to evolve into that version of themselves. Instead, they are left chasing quick fixes, external solutions, or unrealistic expectations that only create more anxiety and distance from their own bodies. And that anxiety quietly kills the very thing they are trying to improve. Because tension and pressure are the enemies of natural performance. And this is why the nighttime routine we are talking about is not just about oil or physical touch. It is about retraining your nervous system to associate intimacy with calmness instead of stress, with awareness instead of distraction, with confidence instead of doubt. Because when you take even a few minutes at night to slow down and reconnect with your body in a mindful way, using natural oils or simple massage techniques, you begin to reverse the damage caused by constant stimulation, constant stress, and constant mental noise. And over time, something interesting happens. Your sensitivity improves, your control increases, and perhaps most importantly, your relationship with your own masculinity becomes less fragile and more grounded. And that grounded energy is something people feel even before anything physical happens. It's in the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you engage. Because true intimacy begins long before the bedroom. It begins in how you exist within yourself. And what many men don't realize is that neglecting this internal connection slowly creates a disconnect that no amount of external effort can fix. Because if your body feels foreign to you, if your mind is constantly racing or doubting, then even the best situations will feel incomplete. And this is why a simple routine done consistently can become something transformative. Not because of the product itself, but because of the intention behind it, the consistency behind it, and the awareness it builds. And when you approach it correctly, it stops being about performance in the narrow sense and starts becoming about mastery in a deeper sense. Mastery over your own energy, your own reactions, your own presence. And this is where older men actually have an advantage if they choose to use it. Because with age comes the ability to understand patterns, to recognize what truly matters, to move away from impulsive behavior and into intentional action, but only if they are willing to let go of outdated beliefs about what intimacy should look like. Because the truth is that the most attractive form of masculinity is not frantic or forced. It is calm, controlled, aware, and deeply connected. And when you build that through small nightly habits, you are not just improving a single aspect of your life. You are reshaping how you experience connection as a whole. And that is something no quick fix can ever replicate, because it is built from within, slowly, quietly, consistently, until one day you realize that the doubts that once bothered you have faded, replaced by a quiet confidence that doesn't need validation. And that is when intimacy becomes something richer, something deeper, something far more satisfying than anything driven by pressure or insecurity ever could be. Because now it is not about proving anything. It is about sharing something real, something grounded, something fully present. And that shift changes everything without anyone else even needing to know why. And as that quiet confidence begins to settle into your body, something else starts to shift that most men don't expect. Your awareness of subtle sensations becomes sharper, not just physically but emotionally. And this is where the deeper layer of the nighttime routine reveals itself. Because what you are really cultivating is sensitivity without fragility, control without suppression, and presence without overthinking. And that combination is rare, because most men are either too disconnected from their bodies or too anxious within them, constantly analyzing, constantly worrying about outcomes, constantly measuring themselves against an invisible standard that keeps them trapped in their own head. And when that happens, intimacy stops being an experience and becomes a performance. And performance in that sense is exhausting, because it demands constant validation, constant proof, constant reassurance. But when you begin to build a nightly ritual that slows everything down, even something as simple as warming a small amount of oil in your hands and taking deliberate time to reconnect with your body, to breathe more deeply, to feel without rushing, you are sending a different message to your mind. You are teaching it that there is no urgency, no threat, no pressure to prove anything. And over time, this reduces the internal noise that sabotages so many moments of connection. Because anxiety thrives in speed and distraction, but it weakens in stillness and awareness. And this is why the routine must be done with intention, rather than as a mechanical task. Because the power is not in the action alone, but in the state of mind you bring to it. And when done consistently, it begins to rewire your response patterns, so that instead of reacting with tension, you respond with calmness. Instead of rushing, you stay present. Instead of doubting, you trust your body's natural rhythm. And this trust is something that cannot be faked or forced. It is built gradually through repetition and awareness. And what makes it even more powerful is that it extends beyond the physical into how you connect with a partner. Because when you are more present with yourself, you become more present with someone else. You listen more, you notice more, you respond more intuitively rather than mechanically, and that creates a level of connection that is deeply felt but rarely explained. And this is where many older men rediscover something they thought was fading, not because it was truly gone, but because it had been buried under years of stress, distraction, and misunderstanding. Because the body does not simply lose its ability, it adapts to how it is treated. And when it is constantly rushed, overstimulated, or ignored, it begins to respond in ways that reflect that neglect. But when it is given attention, care, and intentional focus, it begins to recover, to recalibrate, to respond with more balance and control. And this is why the idea of a nighttime oil routine should never be reduced to a quick tip or a surface-level trick, because that misses the entire point. The real transformation comes from the shift in how you relate to your own body and your own energy. And that shift changes everything from the inside out. Because instead of chasing intensity, you begin to cultivate depth. Instead of relying on external stimulation, you build internal awareness. And instead of fearing loss, you develop a sense of control that feels natural rather than forced. And as this continues, something even more subtle happens. Your confidence becomes quieter but stronger, less dependent on outcomes and more rooted in presence. And this kind of confidence is not loud or performative. It does not need to prove itself because it is felt rather than displayed. And that changes how others perceive you as well. Because people are naturally drawn to someone who is grounded, someone who is not trying too hard, someone who is fully there in the moment. And this is why the routine is not just about what happens at night, but about how it shapes your entire approach to intimacy and connection. Because when you train yourself to slow down in private, you carry that same energy into shared experiences. And that is where true transformation happens. Not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of small, intentional actions that reshape your habits, your mindset, and your relationship with yourself. And the truth is that most men underestimate the power of these small actions because they are looking for something dramatic, something immediate, something that feels like a breakthrough. But real change is rarely dramatic. It is subtle, gradual, almost invisible at first, until it becomes undeniable. And by the time you notice it, it has already become part of who you are. And that is when you realize that what once felt like effort now feels natural. What once caused anxiety now feels calm. And what once felt uncertain now feels controlled. And that is the real power behind this practice. Not just improving a specific aspect of performance, but transforming the entire way you experience intimacy, connection, and yourself. And when that transformation settles in fully, what you begin to notice is not just improvement, but a complete redefinition of what performance even means to you. Because it no longer revolves around pressure or proving anything, it becomes an extension of how calm, aware, and connected you are within yourself. And that shift is where everything finally comes together in a way that feels effortless rather than forced. Because the habits you have built in those quiet nighttime moments have trained your body and mind to work with you instead of against you. And this is the part most men never reach, because they abandon the process too early, expecting immediate results, instead of understanding that what they are really building is a new foundation, one that supports not just physical performance, but emotional stability, confidence, and presence. And when that foundation is strong, everything built on top of it becomes more reliable, more consistent. and far more satisfying. And what is often misunderstood is that true control is not about tightening or forcing or trying harder. It is about knowing when to relax, when to slow down, when to stay present without drifting into distraction or anxiety. And that level of control cannot exist without awareness. And awareness is exactly what this routine has been quietly developing within you, night after night, moment by moment, until it becomes second nature. And once it reaches that point, intimacy stops feeling like something you have to manage and starts feeling like something you can fully experience without hesitation, without self-doubt, without that underlying tension that once held you back. And this is where the deeper truth about love psychology reveals itself. Because attraction and connection are not driven by perfection. They are driven by presence, by emotional availability, by the ability to be fully engaged in the moment without being consumed by internal noise. And when you embody that, it changes the dynamic completely, because you are no longer reacting out of fear or insecurity. You are responding mitok a place of stability and confidence that feels natural and grounded. And that kind of energy creates a sense of trust and comfort that cannot be faked, because it is not something you perform. It is something you are. And this is why the journey you have been on through this practice is far more significant than it may have seemed at the beginning. Because it has been quietly reshaping not just your body, but your mindset, your habits, your emotional responses, and your overall relationship with intimacy itself. And as a result, you begin to notice that the things that once caused stress or doubt no longer have the same hold over you, because you have developed a deeper understanding of your own rhythm, your own responses, your own energy. And with that understanding comes a sense of control that is calm rather than rigid, confident rather than forced, and deeply satisfying in a way that goes beyond surface-level experiences. And this is where the final piece comes into focus, because the truth about love psychology is not about tricks or techniques or external strategies. It is about alignment between your mind, your body, and your emotional presence. And when those elements are in sync, everything flows more naturally, more consistently, and more authentically. And the nighttime oil routine that seemed so simple at the beginning becomes a symbol of that alignment. A daily reminder that true transformation does not come from outside solutions, but from consistent, intentional actions that reconnect you with yourself. And when you carry that connection into your relationships, it creates a depth and quality of intimacy that cannot be replicated by anything superficial, because it is rooted in something real, something stable, something that continues to grow over time rather than fading under pressure. And that is ultimately what every man is searching for, whether he realizes it or not. Not just better performance, but a deeper sense of confidence, connection, and fulfillment that comes from understanding himself on a level that most people never reach. And when you arrive at that place, you realize that nothing was ever truly missing. It was simply waiting to be rediscovered through awareness, patience, and consistency. And that is the truth most men are never told. But once you understand it, it changes everything in a way that feels both powerful and natural at the same time. Because now you are no longer chasing something outside of yourself. You are building something within, and that is what makes it last.